Good morning, truth. This morning I'm going to answer a question that happened to come in. And the question was about Lot. I will share the question and the simplicity of the question in a few minutes. But first, I want to lay the foundation by telling you who Lot was and kind of giving you a little insight into his life and his lifestyle. Lot was the nephew of Abraham. Lot's father, Haran, died unexpectedly, and at some point, possibly soon after Haran's death, Lot's grandfather, Terah, decided to relocate his entire family to Canaan. After Lot's grandfather's death, the Lord spoke to Abraham and told him to resume the journey that he had given him, promising to make him into a great nation. And Abraham, he set out on his journey, and Lot, his nephew, decided to go with his uncle. When they came to Bethel, Abram and Lot's sheep herders began quarreling because there was not enough land to support the amount of livestock that both Abraham and Lot had. So Abraham, with his love and his heart for God and his family, he presented an offer to Lot, and he said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between our herdsmen, for we are brothers. It is not the whole land before you ours. Let's just separate ourselves. If you decide that you want to take the land to the left, then I'll go right. If you decide that you want to take the land to the right, then I'll go left." Lot chose the land near the Jordan River, as it was rich and lush. And Abraham took the other land, and Lot left his uncle and settled his family near the sinful city of Sodom. There were 5 kings that reigned in that particular area: the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela. Now all of them were subject to King Kilomador, and they all rose up against Lot. But King Kilomador waged war against the other kings and won, and he seized all the goods in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And he also took Lot and his family as part of his spoils and part of his victory. When Abraham heard about this, he went into family protection mode. You know how we can do when somebody starts messing with our peoples. He went into family protection mode, and he assembled an army and waged war against King Kilomador. Abraham stormed the camp of Kilomador at night, and he won. He then recovered Lot and his family, as well as all the goods the army had taken from Sodom and Gomorrah. Afterward, Lot returned to Sodom, which was a very wicked city. Now, keep in mind, before he was living right outside of Sodom, not in the city, but now he has returned to Sodom, the wicked city. And because of Lot's decisions, his hardship did not end with his uncle's rescue. Lot was very aware of the wickedness of Sodom, but he chose to move there. And although Lot was counted as a righteous man, he allowed his family to endure the inevitable, which is to become entrenched in the city and its culture. God decided that he was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities because of their great sins. But he also decided in his grace that he would send 2 angels to Sodom just for the sole purpose of rescuing Lot and his family from this city's fate. And as Lot sat at the gateway of the city, he saw the two angels, and he mistakenly took them for just regular men, and he invited them to stay in his house. He was a hospitable man. And the angels told Lot that they would spend the night in the town square. But Lot didn't think that was a good idea. He insisted strongly, knowing how dangerous it is in the city square, that the angels accepted his invitation and stay at his house. And Lot prepared a meal for them and provided them a place to sleep. Well, before the angels could settle in for the night, a crowd of men gathered outside of Lot's house, and they demanded access to Lot's guests. They wanted to have homosexual relationships with them. Now we can see the magnitude of the city's sinful effect on Lot here. For in an effort to protect the men under his roof, and with all of his righteousness in place, Lot thought that this sin may be worse than another sin. So what he did was he offered up his two daughters to these men to have sex with, instead of them pursuing to have sex with these other men. But the crowd wasn't going for it. They wanted the men, and they tried to break into Lot's house. And the two angels quickly pulled Lot inside, shut the door, and struck the men outside with blindness. And then they ordered Lot to gather up his family and to leave immediately, because they said that they would destroy the city and everyone in it. Lot began to speak to his son-in-laws, but they refused to leave, considering that Lot's warning to be an impending judgment. You know how you can't judge people for what they want and what they like. And so they took it as a joke, and clearly they were not wanting to leave outside of the sins of this city. But when the time of destruction drew near, Lot too was a little hesitant, to the point where the angels had to drag Lot and his wife physically, along with his two daughters, out of the city. Can you imagine angels coming to your rescue and you being so stuck in the ways of the world that you resist the assistance of angels? Can you imagine? The angels, after dragging him out, urged Lot to go to the mountains, but Lot requested to go to a nearby city of Zoar instead. It was as if he was saying, okay, I'm out of the immediate sinfulness of that city, but I don't want to be too far from it. The Lord granted his request and vowed to spare that city for Lot's sake. How many of you know that when we keep resisting God's guidance, He will grant us our request and let us have what we want, even though what He has for us is better than what we have our minds fixated on. And as they fled, Lot's wife looked back at Sodom, because she loved Sodom and she desired it, and she had fun there, and they were profitable there. But the Lord turned her into a pillar of salt. She became memorialized as a symbol of God's distaste for our desire to preserve any form of evil. A warning to all who fixate their eyes and their hearts and their minds to even gaze, more or less nurture any longing that we may have in us for what God has denounced. After the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and his wife being turned into a pillar of salt, which is a little stunning, Lot was afraid to stay in Zoar. So he settled in the mountains with his daughters. He was now destitute. He had lost everything. So he and his daughter lived in a cave. And it was here in that cave that Lot's daughters devised a disturbing plan to continue their family lineage, a plan that was likely influenced by the complacencies of the sins that they had been raised in. The world had convinced them that it was okay to do whatever it took to get what they wanted. And what they wanted was to have babies, sons particularly, so that they could one day bask in their sons' wealth, if for any reason they did not secure themselves husbands. That was the mindset of the women there. And in that time, that was the mindset of the women. The plan they came up with was to get their father Lot so drunk that he didn't know what was happening, and then to sleep with him, to have sex with him. And lo and behold, both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by him. The question that I received that prompted this message was, did Lot notice that they lived in a cave? No one else but him and his daughters. And they were popping up pregnant. Where did he think these babies were coming from? Let me explain something to you. Much of Lot's life is a picture of the consequences, decisions, and dysfunctions birthed out of greed and complacency regarding sinfulness. Yes, Lot knew God, but he chose to live among people who would lead his family into sin. He knew God, but he turned from the will and the ways of God, and he settled in the complacency of a sinful atmosphere. There is a lesson that stems from this very question that prayerfully will invoke an awakening in all of us. See, because when one is content in a lifestyle of sin, not only are they slaves to the sin or sins they have become comfortable in seeing, comfortable in being in the midst of, they also become blind. They become distracted, so focused on what is irrelevant, so focused on the superficial, the materialistic, that what is important, what is righteous, is no longer part of how anything they mentally or spiritually process. That disconnect from God and righteousness also targets and positions us to become involuntary tools to manipulate, sustain, and exalt more sin. In Ephesians 4:27, the scripture tells us, do not give the devil any opportunity to work. See, once we allow sin, which is anything that does not align with the will or the ways of God, to be what we exalt, to be what we allow to become part of our norm, that sin will manifest other sins. See, because sin has a tendency. Sin, in all actuality, is created by Satan to consume every aspect of our being. It's created to steal our sight, to compromise our reasoning, to kill our souls, which is why we can't afford to brush off this sin or consider that sin a small indiscretion, because all sin is a seed that is watered by our contentment, by our complacency, by our level of comfortability with it. I want y'all to keep the questions coming. Submit them as a response to the text messages that you receive, or simply go on our website, www.bibledeliverance.org, and submit your questions there. Remember, when you start your day with truth, blessings throughout the remainder of the day is inevitable.
Talk to me, Jesus.